Hello again everyone and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John and as always, thank you so much for being here. Straightforward topic, let's do it. What's the scariest encounter you've ever had? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Scary in different ways. One time I was swimming in the sea and suddenly felt I couldn't move my feet because the current was too strong. I was just stuck in that spot and felt like maybe the current wasn't gonna just, pull me in completely. A couple was swimming nearby, but I didn't want to bother them. The moment didn't feel real. Luckily, the current relaxed after a bit, released my feet, and I could swim back to the shore. But it was a tense moment. I feel like the sea is probably both the nicest and scariest thing in the world, the sheer size and power of it. I, 21 female at the time, was in a store picking up some items for my house when I noticed a man was literally peeking at me from around a corner. I first brushed it off and continued my shopping, but was aware that this man was following me around the store. He then sang out to me, and I said I looked familiar and asked if I went to the local university. I didn't, so I said no. At this point I got creeped out, so I checked out and went to my car. I heard footsteps behind me and knew he had followed me, so I just jumped in my car and locked the doors. It was dark, so I hadn't noticed him go around the back of my car until he banged on my passenger window. I ignored him and started the car. This prompted him to run around the front and start banging on my driver's side door, trying to open it and asking me for a ride. I was terrified and just pulled out of the parking space as fast as I could and drove off, with him chasing my car until they rounded a corner. I have no idea what his plan was, but to this day, I'm nervous about dark parking lots at night. When my son was 11 months old, he hit his head pretty hard at daycare, so I took him to the ER. They did a CT just in case. I'm pretty sure just to appease my first-time mom nerves. I knew they had seen something because they transferred us to Children's for an MRI, but I assumed it was all related to the injury. Then, someone informed me a neurosurgeon was coming in to talk to us. This man walked in, introduced himself, and then bluntly told me that my son had a brain tumor. He had a 9-hour craniotomy after serial MRIs showed it to be slow growing, but growing nonetheless. That was terrifying too, but nothing will compare to the paralyzing fear of the moment when I found out. His neurosurgeon achieved a near total resection, surgical removal, and since he's had no recurrence or progression since, he's never had to do chemo or radiation. Official diagnosis from pathology was diffuse astrocytoma, grade 2. He's 18 and doing well now. When I was a kid, I once was at home alone at night. Then I saw someone staring at me through the window. He disappeared shortly after I noticed him. After that, I saw someone walking under the windows a couple of times. I thought I was just seeing things, but I was really scared. A few years later, our entire family noticed someone snooping around the same way. Turns out, our elderly neighbor was sneaking around the yard and stealing my dad's tools from the shed. When I was 13 and we lived in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, we went on vacation to Pangkor Island. I went for a walk one afternoon and attempted to reach the point of the peninsula that defined the bay the resort was located on. Approximately 2/3 of the way out, I was traversing big rocks where the jungle met the ocean since there was no beach at this point. I looked to my left into the jungle and about 20 feet away looking at me was a tiger. I froze. It froze. I stepped backwards, still making eye contact because I'm a dummy. After what felt like an hour but was probably 2.5 minutes, it just sauntered away. I did not make it to the peninsula point. I turned around and jumped in the fancy resort pool and contemplated my mortality in a specifically early teen angsty manner. I don't know if it's the scariest one, but all that comes to mind right now. A few months back, I was taking a late night walk and had this big dog growling and barking at me. My heart was racing, but from what I've seen about these encounters, you have to hold your ground and be big and loud like it was a bear. It worked, but damn, I was on edge. My dog dragged me at a manhole at the side of the road and went crazy trying to go down there. A drain pipe passed below this road and ended up in some kind of closed space built with bricks on the other side. I clipped the string of the leash between my phone and his cover and lowered the phone with video and flash on to see what was inside. After just a couple of seconds, and howling scared the shit out of me, and we went away. Went power walking through the woods with a friend on a late August evening. Not long into my activity, my friend didn't have the energy to power walk any longer, and we slowed down. It was summer, so the sun wouldn't set until late, right? Wrong. Sun is setting quickly, and about midway into our walk, we find ourselves in overwhelming darkness. This was before everyone carried a phone with integrated flashlight app. We could barely see the trail in front of us. Thankfully, a cyclist shows up behind us and stays with us to light up the rest of the way. That said, his bicycle light was one of those old, barely illuminating lights with a narrow light cone, which, when you're in the middle of the forest and it's pitch black dark, doesn't illuminate much. Still very grateful. At least we could see where we were going. Now, we don't have bears around here, and we didn't have wolves yet at the time, but if you've ever encountered an angry wild boar, you know it's time to say your last prayer. It's dark, so we don't see them, but we hear them grunting, and we can still smell them. Right next to us, not one, not two, it must have been a dozen or more, and we have no idea what they're doing or if they plan to charge at us anytime soon for having trespassed into their territory at night. This is the point where I should have been scared, but frankly, there was no time for it, because my friend suddenly rediscovered her will to live and move quickly, surpassing power walking speed and going straight to cycling speed. I had honestly trouble to keep up with her because I was laughing so hard. Happened about 11 years ago when I was 17. I was out with the homies drinking at some house parties, and two of my friends and myself decided to go downtown and pick up some tacos from a local taqueria. We arrived and get in a long line that starts at the rear parking lot and goes into the establishment from the rear door. As we get halfway inside, we notice a table of about 12 dudes, all of them essays, and they keep looking at us and sizing us up. We decide to leave the location, as there's a chance of danger. As we leave, they get up and follow. We hop in the car, and my friend that's driving us completely freezes up at the sight of them walking to our car. They proceed to surround the car, and the older head in their group is tapping on my window and telling me to open the door. He then opens it himself and asks me where I'm from, gang shit for asking what neighborhood you claim. I tell him I don't bang, and he proceeds to pull a pistol from his waistband and place it into my rib cage. He asks me again, "Where you from, fool?" I told him I don't bang. At that moment, I knew I was going to get shot. He pressed the barrel harder into my ribs. I can tell he was contemplating what his next move is. My two other friends are quiet and white as ghosts. The driver of the car I was in then proceeds to talk them up, saying something like, "I heard your gang is rolling deep and making a name, etc." The older homie then gets his ego pumped from that and rants about how my driver is right and starts yelling out his set. He puts his gun in his waistband, and the 12 heads yell out their set and walk away. I was extremely terrified my life was going to end in a dark parking lot behind a taqueria. Luckily, my friend spoke up and said what we said. There came a moment where I just accepted that I was going to have a couple bullets in me, but I got lucky. Safe to say I don't go to that taco spot anymore. Rural country in California. Up in the desert, mountains, and cougar country and mobile home, only 100 or so people lived in this area. My sisters are laying in their bed, 7 and 8 years old. Then the windows start to jiggle a little bit, possibly just an earthquake. Then it gets louder, and you can hear someone prying. It's just the one window. The blinds are closed, so you can't see what or who is out there. Someone's trying to break in. The dog outside on a leash starts barking like mad. My sisters start screaming, and the sound stops. It never happens again. But none of us ever forgot it, and we don't know who or what was doing it. But it was something worth noting that there was a dead body found a few months later. A person was murdered with an axe. One weekend I was coming back home to my dorm after spending the weekend at my dad's house when I remembered I didn't have milk, so I decided to stop at this little gas station next to campus. The second I walked inside, my spidey sense tingled. There was a man probably in his 50s who locked on me immediately, as in, completely unabashedly stared at me from the moment I walked in. I swear it could have only been creepier if he'd licked his lips, but I saw that he was in line to check out, so I figured I'd duck into the ladies' room and he'd be gone by the time I got out. Nope. When I came out of the restroom, he'd gotten out of line and was stalking around the aisles, still watching me as he walked back up to the checkout. I got my milk and was a couple people behind him in line, trying not to freak out. Then, when he checked out, he took his bag, walked out, and stood next to the exit door, still watching me. Thank God for the clerk, who noticed what was going on and said, "Do you want to stay in here for a while?" I'm sure I was shaking like a leaf when I nodded, but fortunately there was no one behind me. So he let me stay there and chat until the guy finally got in his truck and drove off. That was almost 15 years ago, but to this day, I believe that guy meant me harm. I've never been so freaked out in my life. It's always good when a person can witness someone else's behavior and offer some assistance because, yeah, that guy was pretty creepy. But, props to that clerk for helping out. Glad you're alright. I used to live with an ex who, despite knowing she was terrible for me, I was desperate to keep trying. She wasn't mentally well, and quite frankly, I put up with a lot of emotional abuse that still kind of haunts me to this day. She was hyper-religious, going as far as to say that she had a gift of speaking to the dead, something her family would agree with. I'd seen some of these moments take place, but never really thought to do anything. I'm stupid, I know. However, nothing could have prepared me for one night after she came home from work. She worked nights and would often come home around 5 a.m. I stayed up to greet her. We talked, did some not-so-holy things, and went to watching a TV show. Suddenly, she gets this horrified look on her face. I asked her what was up, and she said, "There's something in here." Then she begins to scream as loudly as possible. We lived in a studio apartment with paper-thin walls, so I was trying to stop her from alerting the neighbors and having the police called. Neither of us could afford hospitalization, so I couldn't think of much else. She continues to go back and forth between screaming, crying, and laughing, all while contorting her body in these weird ways. It was so bad it even got my aesthetics asked to pray. I then decided to call her parents. They rushed over and came in with a rosary bead, herbs, and a speaker playing Christian music. They told me to step outside, which I gladly did. I tried calling my mom to try to calm myself down. Call it bad luck or whatever, but my effing phone decided to prank me and dies mid-call. I then sat outside the apartment trying to comprehend anything that was happening. Her mother came outside. Being near panic, I was breathing really heavily, and being the bitch that I am, crying. I guess she interpreted this as the devil, so she slaps me on the chest repeatedly, declaring, "Jesus, enter this man." I don't know what made it worse, the fact that this happened, or that an effing neighbor witnessed all of this, and all her mother had to say when questioned was a cheerful, "Nope, we're good," as if this was effing normal. Eventually she calms down, and they tell me to stay wary of demonic forces, who apparently target her frequently due to her gifts. I agreed, and re-entered to check on my ex. We didn't talk much, just tried to sleep and forgot this happened. Except for me. I didn't sleep for days. I honestly feel kind of bad because I made her carry rosary beads wherever she went after this. It was the only time I made her do anything, honestly. I was extremely paranoid ever since, and I wanted a break from all of this. Why I wasn't trying to leave immediately, I don't know. We went to her parents' house a few days after this, and her mother called me outside. In between cigarettes and Diet Coke, she questioned what had happened, and told me stories of other times this had happened, ranging from time she tried to kill her mom to a time when she literally effing died. That solidified it for me. I needed a break before I was sacrificed to Gabriel or whatever her freaky form of faith subscribed to. So I took a job halfway across the country for the summer, one that I had worked the previous year. She was pissed, but I wasn't budging. It honestly felt kinda good to finally stand up for something I wanted to do. We had a tearful farewell, told her I'd be back in 6 weeks, and drove off. Then she left me for a guy from her church, so yeah. Not really as scary as others here, but my dog one even started barking hellfire blood and bones up in my room. I'm really good at discerning whether he's barking at someone out of my window or just because he got spooked by a fart. But when he ran downstairs to me, his hackles were up and he was scared shitless. We went back up together and there was nothing. Needless to say, I was home alone, turned on all the lights, and got my dad's baseball bat from his office, just in case, lol. Went out with friends when I was like 20, and his aunt worked at a bar in the suburbs that was kinda trashy, and we got in underage. Had one beer, then drove to his aunt and uncle's house to hang out in their garage and grill. Uncle was nice at first, and pretty big and tall dude. I'm 5'6" and skinny. Hung out for a while and then ate, and his uncle got pretty drunk and was talking to me in a way that felt vaguely uncomfortable. I can't explain it. I guess he's hitting on me? I told my friends I felt uncomfortable and wanted to go, and they were like, no, it's cool, he's just drunk. Well, he ended up trying to grab me over the glass patio table they had set up, to the point he basically fell over and my friends took me home immediately. His aunt pulled him away and apologized, but it scared the shit out of me. I've never felt so gaslit in my life because I knew something was wrong. Also, one time a guy came up behind me and honked my boobs at a bar. Not the worst thing, but also weird. I must have been around 10 years old at the most. My parents did foster caring since I was a baby, and we had one boy living with us, I'll call him Bobby, long term, who was known to basically be a complete nutter. He was only about 12, small and skinny, but everyone was afraid of him. He was a troubled kid and violent, but was always pretty nice to me though. One day Bobby announced that he had finished making a bow and arrow. He made it out of a bullwhip he had found in a field, stripped off the leather to leave a plastic core, and used the core as the bow, and asked if we wanted to go up to the nearby field to test it. Of course we said yes. There were probably 8 to 10 of us, grouped together in the middle of the field as he shot the arrows he had whittled, with flights made out of feathers. It was genuinely impressive. He got to his last arrow, aimed to shoot it across the field, then at the last moment tilted his aim up. He shot the arrow directly up into the sky above the group of kids. I think we all watched it for a bit, but then the arrow just disappeared into the blue sky, and we all collectively shat ourselves, running in random directions. I remember looking back over my shoulder up at the sky, thinking an arrow could come down on my skull at any moment. It didn't hit anyone. It must have buried itself in the earth somewhere. Once enough time had gone by for us to realize the arrow was no longer in the sky, we all found it quite funny. When I think back about it, the whole situation was insane. It was like he played Russian roulette with all of us. I've been threatened with a knife twice, once by another foster kid, but never felt as afraid as I did then. Someone threatening you tends to carry an element of doubt and fear themselves. It's just not as scary as someone who just didn't care if they hurt you or not. Bobby left the house a few years later. After he threatened my mom with a baseball bat he had whittled from a branch. I think he had started using drugs by that point. I often wonder where he is now. I'd be surprised if he was still alive. My wife gave birth to our 10-pound, 4-ounce son. No meds, intervention, or anything. I know many mothers and medical professionals recoil at the thought of that, but it wound up saving her life. About 30 minutes after he was born, she was being sewn back together. As soon as the OBGYN finished, my wife started getting pains again, and it was spiking rapidly. They gave her a little oxycodone, still hurt. Then they tried morphine, pain was increasing to labor levels. Then they tried fentanyl, didn't touch the pain. At this point, it was referring to random places all over her body. When she said the fentanyl was having zero effect, the mood on the whole floor palpably shifted from new baby celebration to trauma response. It was like being back aboard my ship, where we'd set general emergency conditions for major mechanical casualty. The boat goes from boring to gut-churning intense in seconds. I'm a brand new EMT at this point, so I have just enough training and information to know how bad this is getting. 20 minutes later, she's in emergency surgery. 20 minutes after that, she's on a helicopter to Seattle. So there I am, sleep-deprived, stressed out beyond the ability to think, holding a new baby with no idea if I just kissed my wife goodbye for the last time. I went past fear into some kind of black depths where all I could see was me falling as a father without her support. I'd rather be aboard a burning, sinking military ship than go through that again. I know how to survive the fire and flooding. Turns out, our son had shoulder dystocia during the birth, and it likely ruptured a vein. It created a hemorrhage that was 10 by 7 by 15 centimeters in her body cavity. The cantaloupe-sized ball of blood was compressing nerves. Had she gotten the spinal blocker, we may not have caught the bleed in time. Surgeons at Swedish Medical in Seattle said it visibly distended her abdomen and hips. Damn terrifying.